We continue this week of Christmas of Locked On Coyotes where we discuss the Tucson Roadrunners. A second day, we discuss the Tucson Roadrunners. Brett Fera of the Arizona Daily Star will be joining us in just a moment, but be sure to stick on Locked On Coyotes.
You're Locked On Coyotes, your daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Robyn, Leonia, Carl Pavlik right beside me on this wonderful Wednesday. It is December 22nd at the time you guys are all listening to this. The Tucson Runners are set to be playing the Abbotsford Canucks. So we're talking more Tucson. We had Adrian Denny, voice of the Tucson Roadrunners, on yesterday. Hope you guys all enjoyed that episode. And we're going to continue having a conversation with Brett Fera of the Arizona Daily Star. We had him before the season began for the Roadrunners, and now we're having him right around the Christmas break, right before Abbotsford. Brett, how you doing?
Good. How are you both doing?
Oh, not too bad. I just excited for Christmas, get things going. We have California fun.
I'm excited for the AHL's Christmas break. We get 8 days of no hockey, which, don't get me wrong, I love it, but it's a breather to reset and get ready for the second 2/3 of the season.
Oh yeah, I wish the NHL had a little bit longer of a break, but that is not happening.
Yeah, the NHL does not want to go up against the NBA on Christmas, so at least you get a couple days.
Yeah, it's a few, but not many. Potentially, depending on how things work out, because we're very fluid right now with everything.
That's true. That's a great point. There might be games on the 26th, 27th to make up for, especially because of time that's available now. They might go and flip the script on these guys.
Yeah,
I mean, some of these games might be where the Olympics are, where the Olympic break was supposed to be, which probably might not happen. So.
Yeah, it's weird. There could be games on this weekend that are rescheduled, or there could be no games until the start of the next year. Honestly, the situation right now seems to be like a pendulum that's swinging back and forth between two extremes.
And let's go real quick. I just want to get your thoughts on that. We talked about it on Monday's episode. What are your thoughts on how the NHL is handling all of this? And how COVID has run rampant through professional sports.
Well, it's interesting that it isn't just professional sports. I mean, we could call it professional sports, but it's happening at the college sports level. It's happening at professional sports. It's happening at minor league and NHL or major league level sports. I think that's the most interesting dynamic to me, is if you really look at, and look, if anyone from the Roadrunners organization is listening, this is not a slight on AAA hockey by any stretch, but if you look at the depth of personnel to support teams, the major league levels obviously have the most. Then it's your major college programs, and that's still getting hit. So you saw the U of A women's basketball team have to cancel a game this past weekend against Texas for COVID protocols. Then you have minor pros top level, which is the AHL for hockey in particular. And so I think that's the concern, is the facilities. When I say depth, I don't just mean personnel, but ability to space guys out. If they have to rent another bus to give guys more room on a bus, not that that's going to do it, but I mean, things like that, that's going to be more plausible at the NHL level, at the major college level for various sports. So I am curious to see how this is handled. We've already seen some teams struggle. I think it's interesting with the Roadrunners up in Canada this weekend or this week pre-Christmas, because of the protocols that are evolving every single day between the U.S. and its two neighboring border countries. So, I mean, it may be a difficult swing to get guys back. I'm not trying to start something. I'm just saying we don't know. To Carl's point, we really don't know. And so I think the NHL in particular, to answer the question, Robyn, is probably doing as best as they can. But obviously, to what degree? And I think they've left themselves little wiggle room, just like the NFL. The NFL can't see a lot of games get canceled because they don't have more than a week to build into the schedule because they have 2 weeks between that last playoff series and the Super Bowl. The NHL doesn't have much wiggle room either, because as you mentioned, Carl, the Olympic break, the only plausible thing would be that the Olympic break doesn't happen if they have to start replacing a bunch of games. And then what does that mean for guys going overseas? Do they send guys over and still have the NHL teams play their games, and all of a sudden you're now pausing the AHL because you're calling up the second tier players to fill spots, just like is happening this week with Carolina and some of these places that have, dropped into the mid to high teens in terms of availability. So the short answer is I think they're doing the best they can, but I don't think anybody can predict anything. And I think everyone has to be prepared for fluidity across the board, to use the word Carl used to start the show.
It's one of those weird situations where, like, looking back, I almost wish they had done another taxi squad, but I feel like that could have just compounded the problems. Like, the NHL is just being hit really hard right now, and I do think it's kind of interesting that we're not getting the same stories about the AHL. We're not seeing AHL teams shut down games or have to play without fans that we've seen for the NHL, and
it is happening. I mean, Laval in particular had half the arena filled last weekend for I can't remember who they played, and then ultimately I think the game got canceled, if I'm not mistaken. So the intent was it to be half full. There's about I'm getting the alerts from the AHL, and there's a good, a minimum a game a day that's getting canceled over the last week or so. So it is happening. It's just, or postponed, but there's just not the media coverage of it nationally to make it a big enough deal.
And I'll go a step further too on all of this too. And obviously we're still days away from this, and we don't know. There's still a lot of unknowns about this, but they're probably going to try to make sure this happens. And I'm talking about the World Junior Championship, because once Christmas ends, that begins, and we're talking players from around the world going into Edmonton to play a 2-3 week long tournament. I mean, luckily it's all in Edmonton. It's essentially like a bubble. But
well, I think that's the saving grace. I mean, if they wanted to, they could tack on a 3 or 4 day lead in and do a testing and mini quarantine for everybody if they chose to. So, I mean, it's possible that you just start pushing teams and players to get in early. But something that's interesting, though, with this whole thing, and you brought it up with the taxi squad, is, you look at even affecting the Roadrunners and former Roadrunners. So Hudson Fasching is a really good example. Jordan Gross, who's now with Colorado, he's with the Colorado Eagles, and I think he leads the AHL in scoring for defensemen right now. God forbid he should have been held into this organization somehow. But I'm just saying, like, it's just there was all this talk of your Michael Buntings and your Connor Garlands, but they lost a lot of other pieces too that could have at least been contributors over this few year stretch. But Jordan Gross spent the entire season on the taxi squad for the Coyotes. Didn't play, I think, a single NHL game. Maybe played a couple. I could be wrong. I'm getting him conflated with a couple other players. But Hudson Fasching played, I think, 4 games at the AHL level, 6 at the NHL level. These are lost seasons for these guys in the theoretical prime of their careers, whether they're NHL players, quadruple A level players or not. Dakota Myrmus, if you guys remember that name, was the captain of the Roadrunners a couple of years ago. Literally spent the entire season on the Minnesota Wild's taxi squad. Didn't play a single AHL game and only played, I think, the last 4 games of the season for Minnesota in the NHL level last year. I mean, these are literal lost seasons. And I had a conversation with Fasching about it. And he said, I kind of made a joke. And I go, I'm hoping they were paying you the NHL prorated salary. And he goes, nope, taxi squad got the AHL salary. And so I would imagine, even though it doesn't affect the day-to-day regular NHLers, that there would be some pushback over the taxi squad, especially for that reason alone, that you better pay these guys like they're on a real NHL squad, which the teams would obviously balk at, because you're talking about another half dozen salaries you got to pay at full force. But that's, to me, the biggest thing is you got a guy like that who is, again, his prime was probably 2-3 years ago, but he's not done making moves yet. And yet he basically practiced the whole season, which everyone had it weird. It was shortened, all the stuff that went on. But I think that the taxi squad would be useful, but I also think the players would say, heck no.
I will say, I did not know that about the taxi squad. I don't think that it was very widely reported what the pay rate was.
I don't think it was.
Should have been. It absolutely should have been NHL wages. You are basically spending a year as a black ace.
Yep.
You should be getting NHL wages.
And again, I haven't done the digging on that. That's just one player told me that, so I have no reason not to believe him. But And it was just in passing. I mean, it wasn't off the record or anything like that, but it was just like kind of in a conversation about some other stuff, and it wasn't something that I had the need at that moment. This was a month ago, so it was after the fact. It didn't play a role. There was no worry about the potential of something like that again.
Right.
But if
Yeah.
you look at this right now, I mean, are they even in a position to add players to taxi squads? But the way that these teams have been built, it was another interesting conversation. Zane Mcintyre, basically the third goalie, kind of the second goalie, but the third goalie in essence in terms of true roster depth for the Roadrunners. I mean, this dude put up legit all-star level numbers last year in Lehigh Valley and couldn't find a job. And this is where I could have probably done something on this if I dug a little deeper. Some of it's hard because we just don't get a ton of time with these guys to really ask exactly what they're saying. But he was explaining that he thinks it's because of taxi squads. Basically, that this year, the reset of the league that pushed guys back down, especially at the goaltender position, eliminated a significant number of positions. Half the goaltending spots in the league, if you think teams are really only going to carry two, the Roadrunners are kind of an exception. And so he was probably in the middle of that pack, as good as he played, because he's also 30 years old. And so he basically was without a job until the Roadrunners and Coyotes, really the Roadrunners, gave him a PTO. Yet his career numbers, I think I saw something that said his worst season of his career was better than the combination of Prosvetov and Kozanash through the first 3 weeks of the season. The worst season of his career. So every other year was better, and he couldn't find a job in the league. And so that's an interesting component of it too, is are there enough players to actually rebuild this? And I'm not saying you're suggesting midway through the season or anything, but they might need to consider it, or at least one or two guys, maybe not a whole six or whatever it was. But
Yeah, it's definitely a weird situation, and I'm very interested to see like what the people in charge decide to do, because something's not working. They need to do something else.
Absolutely. We still got more to get to on this episode of Locked On Coyotes. Once again, Brett Fera of the Arizona Daily Star joining us on today's episode. We are going to continue our conversation about the Tucson Roadrunners as among other topics on today's episode. But first, a couple words from our sponsors.
Got beard, get primal. You heard me right. Got beard, get primal. If you or someone you care about has a beard, it needs to get primal. Maybe you're that guy who's never considered the benefits of treating your beard with product. Primal Origin oils will stop the itch and make your beard look healthy and groomed. These products are free from harmful synthetic ingredients and with a low impact on our planet. Primal Origin oils makes balms, oils, and whipped butter that are renowned as the best feel and beard products available. All products are fair trade certified and handcrafted in the United States. The beard combo kits make a great holiday gift, and if you're shopping for yourself, you'll be glad you did. I talked about it a lot. I have a lot of friends with beards. Personally, I don't like a beard. I was looking at some old pictures from a couple years ago when I had a beard. It looked horrible. Probably would have done better with some product. But this was pre-primal, so I didn't know. We all know that companies claim to have the best, but Primal Origin Oils challenges you to compare their ingredients and the feel in the beard with other products you've used. We promise you'll see and feel the difference. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON to get 20% off at primaloriginoils.com. That's promo code LOCKEDON for 20% off.
And this episode brought to you by Built Bar. This holiday season, grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, or even better than a candy bar. Built Bar full of so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but amazing low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat, and it's high in protein. You get the best of both worlds, delicious and healthy. So many flavors, you have a hard time choosing. We have raspberry or mint brownie, cherry or double chocolate, cookies and cream, or peanut butter brownie. Built Bar gives the extra fuel you need to bust down those mall doors and battle all the holiday shoppers. Or if you're just standing in endless shopping lines, Built Bar can give you the extra something to keep you going. So throw it in your jacket or your purse. You never know when you're going to need it. And, because it's the season of giving, why not go ahead and, order a couple extra Built Bars. Give some to your family. They might really appreciate that. As well. And here's a little tip for you guys too. Maybe dip a Built Bar into some hot cocoa during those times you want to cuddle up and just get nice and warm. Melt a little bit to get that Built Bar flavor in that hot cocoa. Plus, you will have that melty Built Bar to go with it. I want you guys to all try this yourself. Go to built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15. You get 15% off your order. Once again, that's LOCKED15. You get 15% off at built.com. And we're back here on Locked On Coyotes. Once again, I'm Robyn Leonio, Carl Pavlik joining me, Brett Fera of the Arizona Daily Star joining the episode. As we discussed in more Tucson Roadrunners, our second day in a row, we're talking Tucson. Once again, I just want to give a second thanks to Adrian Denny for joining us on yesterday's episode. If you have yet to listen to that episode, feel free to go back and listen to that one once we're done with this. But let's go into things, Brett, because this season for the Coyotes and Roadrunners has been quite something, because injuries and COVID has kind of went through the Coyotes, and thus lots of call-ups. We've seen however 8 or 9 call-ups from Tucson this year.
I think
Probably
we've
more.
seen at this point 7 players make their NHL debut with the Coyotes. It was 5, and then I think it was Spears and Mosier making their debuts. Vejmelka was 1, so that leaves like 6 players from the Roadrunners. So that's just insane.
Yeah, I think you have to also take into account the news of this past weekend of Vladislav Provolnev basically, getting on a plane back overseas. I'm assuming to the KHL, but that's a direct impact of these moves too, because there was some potential. I don't think it was likely, but there was some potential coming out of camp that Provolnev might have earned a spot, or might be able to earn a spot. I don't think he did, but might be able to earn a spot with the Coyotes, or at least play well enough to get a call up. And he wasn't bad, but he wasn't standout. I mean, there was nothing that remarkably stood out about what he did with the Roadrunners. And so when you start seeing Cam Dineen and Dyson Mayo, these sort of, at least in Mayo's case, lifelong AHL players, and Dineen in his 3rd plus season, and then JJ Moser 10, 12, 15, 18 games into his career, getting call-ups on the defensive end, and Provolnev basically said, all right, I'm out. And so that's a direct impact too. I mean, not that they would have called him up just to make him happy and then send it back down and be like, okay, well, we did it. But I think that matters. So you not only have the call-ups, you've also got that situation. But yeah, I mean, to already have that many, you're going to probably see Matthias Michelli get a call-up at some point. Even if it's late in the season, a la Jan Yannick and Victor Soderstrom last year. I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen Soderstrom go back up. But although he's been playing really well, I think he had 2 or 3 points against Ontario on Saturday night, so in the overtime win over the Reign. So it's not a surprise, but it goes exactly to the point you made, Carl, about the taxi squad. They're using a taxi squad. They just don't have one with them.
Yeah, essentially. The Provenov was interesting because I remember he was on the rookie development camp, and people were like, "Oh, he's 25. He doesn't need to be there. He is here to like prove that he is willing to work for an NHL spot." And I thought he looked fine as like a physical shutdown defenseman. For Coyotes fans, maybe a la Zbigniew Michalek, Rostislav Klesla, like one of those kind of guys. So it was interesting that he never got the call up, and yeah, I guess he just kind of got tired of it, and that's always unfortunate. It's something you hear a lot about, like KHL players. They don't want to spend time in the AHL. They want to either be in the NHL getting consistent minutes, or they want to be in a professional league in their home country. And I don't necessarily like downplay that. I've worked in another country before. It's tough. I wouldn't want to necessarily do it in that kind of situation. So, whatever. But it's really stretching the Tucson defenseman.
Yeah, it really is. It's going to be interesting to see what they're able to do in terms of working with Rapid City and having even just serviceable fill-ins for that.
Yeah, and especially like if you just look at so far what else has been done. I mean, obviously for the last month plus, you've had Dyson Mayo and Cam Dineen have just been chilling up there in Glendale. It's I've been to be honest, I'm a little surprised they've been up there for that long. I thought there would have been like a switch, like as you mentioned, Soderstrom.
Hey, Mayo's playing almost team high minutes,
Right?
which is not a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that says something, and we all know what that says. But like at the bare minimum, among the guys that are there, he's at least. I mean, knowing him, and I'm not trying to carry water for him, but I got to believe he's at least working his tail off to at least earn that shot. Whether in a typical season that's deserved, for lack of a better word, or not, that's to be determined. But
I mean, it was unfortunate to see Connor Timmons go down with a knee injury so early. It felt like it was just like, oh, this is going to get bad, because I think the team was kind of expecting him to be a major contributor, with the idea that they could potentially send him down if he has a couple problems. But the expectation was he was going to play the full season, but just a knee like derailing his entire season. You're like, oh, what are we going to do? And yeah, call up Tucson.
You guys want to know the Vladislav Provolnev stat of the year that explains his situation better than any?
Of course.
Let's hear it.
1,011 skaters have played a game in the AHL this season. He's dead last at minus 17. I'm not saying that minus means everything, but
sure,
dead last at minus 17 with 1 point. The 10 or 12 guys ahead of him, Joaquin Blitchfield with San Jose, who we know a lot about, at minus 12, has 16 points in 20 games. So like there's, movement. So no scoring and a minus 17. And just lack of impact. That's the answer.
And that's interesting because we were talking about Provornev at the during preseason, during rookie camp, and I asked you, Carl, and like you said, he looked like he was ready for the potential spot. He looked good. And Koyachanik looked pretty good. Koyachanik, by the way, since it's the Tucson Roadrunners episode, did score the game-winning goal last Saturday against the Ontario Reign. But yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely like one of those things where you can't pay too much attention to preseason, because the people who are really engaged, like they're engaged against competition that's not necessarily as engaged.
And to your point about what stats are available at the AHL level, Carl, like we can't really pay too much attention to plus minus, but sometimes the outliers do say something. So I think this is maybe one of those.
Yeah, it could be, but like it's also like for what his role was supposed to be, you wouldn't expect it to be a major minus like role. Like you expected him to be competent enough at the defense, like more of a defensive specialist, and you can't be a minus like at that.
Yeah, there's only one defenseman on the team worse than a -4, and that's Cam Crotty. So other than Provolnev, so to be at minus 17 is a little much.
Yeah. Definitely.
Also, before we get into our next break, just want to get your real quick thoughts. So tonight, assuming nothing has changed in the days actually we pre-recorded this episode, the Roadrunners are playing Abbotsford, and you and I saw the Abbotsford come to Tucson just a couple weeks ago, I think, maybe earlier last month. Your thoughts on this? Your initial thoughts on this before we go more into the next segment.
Are you asking me or Carl?
I don't know. So you better answer, because I will just ramble for an hour.
Abbotsford has actually been on a little bit of a roll since they were in Tucson a couple of weeks ago. I think what's most interesting about this series, and what I think Adrian and I have talked about this a lot on our show, on Roadrunners Happy Hour, on some of the broadcasts that we've done together, is that it's the perfect getaway week for the Christmas week with the number of guys, even though it's a more culturally diverse roster in terms of nationalities than some other teams, meaning it's not 22 Canadians and 3 Americans, but there's still, I think, 13 or 14 Canadians on the roster, and they all have a really easy trek out of Vancouver the night of the 23rd, so essentially Thursday night. And not that affects the play, but I wonder how it affects the play in terms of maybe it makes it a little less stressful because they're not thinking 2 days ahead of how they're going to get through COVID back across wherever. Half this team is already sort of in the area they want to be going, which is either trekking to Toronto or east to Quebec or the rest of the team heading south. I do know a lot of the guys are actually coming back to Tucson who aren't, moving about in Canada. That says nothing about the game themselves. Abbotsford, I think, is better than they played when they were in Tucson. And like I said, they've been on a bit of a hot streak. They've won 2 straight. They've won, 6 of their last 10, which is definitely better than Tucson has been. But I think they are where they're supposed to be, which is in that middle pack. It's hard to differentiate Henderson, Abbotsford, Colorado, Tucson, Bakersfield, and San Diego. Like the 2nd through 8th team are basically might be, 4 or 5 points apart, but they're really not. They're all lumped together. And I think Ontario is sort of sliding into that mix. So it's 3rd through 8 teams. So it's going to be really interesting how these teams shake out. And I think Abbotsford started much slower than they should have. So I think this is going to be a really big test for Tucson, especially a Tucson team that more than likely won't bring every player we just mentioned with them. The fact that they had Blake Spears and Mike Carcone be able to play with or be at least there in Anaheim on Friday and then back with the Roadrunners in Ontario on Saturday is great, but that's not going to necessarily follow them, especially considering the Coyotes Vancouver game. Is that right? Coyotes Vancouver or Coyotes Kraken?
Coyotes Kraken is...
Was it Kraken?
It's going to be the Kraken on Tuesday. And then
it was Coyotes Vancouver over on Sunday was rescheduled, right?
Yes.
I'm getting mixed up. So, so if the Coyotes and the Kraken play, maybe it still sort of works the same way, but because the Coyotes are still going to need guys available.
Yeah.
And so I think the Roadrunners roster is depleted more than it was even on Saturday. I think they're going to have a lot of trouble with Abbotsford.
It'll be an interesting game. One thing I did want to mention pretty quick, just because the last time they played each other, that was the first time since year 1 that they played the Canadian national anthem in the Tucson Arena. And I just loved that you were having an absolute kick out of it.
Did you see the story I wrote on it? It's okay if you didn't, but I wrote a story about it, and I talked to some fans who are from Canada who moved to Tucson. And so this one guy, he's telling me how he, I wish I knew his name off the top of my head. I feel bad, but I had a great conversation with him. And he said, yeah, so he and his wife have season tickets, and they have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And he said, I don't know any songs other than the Canadian national anthem. So that's what I sing my kid to sleep. That's what I sing to him before we go to sleep. So as soon as it starts playing, his son looks up at him and like gives him this like really worried look, basically telepathically saying like, I don't have to go to sleep now, do I? Because he hears it over the speakers. And so he was like, no, we're okay.
That's awesome.
Pretty great. That's the second night. I don't know what the backstory was. I wish I had looked into it, but the second night it was sung by a Tucson Arena worker. He was in full garb, had his like name tag on him and all this stuff. And he just, I don't know if they just like knew he could sing and was like, dude, can you sing the national anthem? We don't want to play it over a recording anymore. I have no idea what the backstory is, but it was kind of funny because he turned around and walked out and went and did his job the rest of the night.
Nice. That's cool.
I found it. Maybe it was a couple of reasons. I noticed that when they did play the recording on that first night, I did notice that they played the quote old version. They updated a couple words.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's no longer.
It's not an all thy sons and all of us. That's what it is.
Oh, interesting.
I
still know the old version. So I grew. We've talked about this. I grew up in LA, going to LA Kings games, and so a lot against Edmonton, Vancouver, Calgary, and there was a guy who used to be sort of the de facto who sang the national anthem on specifically the games that were against Canadian teams. His name was Warren Wiebe. He was an opera singer. He passed away a few years ago, but he would sing the Canadian national anthem, and he did not sing the Star Spangled Banner, though. He sang America the Beautiful, which I loved. And he did both of them, I guess not a cappella because it's one person, but no music behind him, entirely just his voice. And pretty killer renditions. If you Google it, there'll be one from like a playoff game that'll come up, and
probably
it's pretty amazing. But that's how I learned the Canadian national anthem, was from listening to him sing it at Kings games growing up. So I know the whole thing, but I know the old version. I never realized they changed it, and it makes sense. I'm glad they did. be a little more
Inclusive.
21st century. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I know it from a Simpsons episode. There's an episode of The Simpsons where it's a baseball thing and they end with like a fight and they're like, let's sing the national anthem, but not one of war like America, one of peace like Canada. And then they sing the Canadian national anthem. It's just a beautiful end to a mid-season Simpsons episode.
That's great.
Love it.
Absolutely. But another point I wanted to make though was this is also the first time the Roadrunners team going up north of the border, and I think because they never went to Manitoba. I think they only had Manitoba come down here.
That's a good point. I don't remember. That's actually a really good point. It's interesting too, even though it's the Pacific Division, I was looking at it when they were going to Iowa and I got it wrong. I'll admit, I actually got it wrong in my story. I had put just off default and I should have done a better job checking that. Yeah, Iowa's the longest road trip of the year. It's not. It's Abbotsford. It's clearly Abbotsford by a couple hundred miles. So I think that's kind of interesting. And it kind of actually makes me curious, the decision, even though it was sort of made before Abbotsford came into play, the decision to put Seattle's AHL franchise in such close proximity to that of Los Angeles and Anaheim and Tucson and Vegas, rather than having it a little further north, because you basically got Abbotsford on this island and then San Jose. And for now, at least I say that because there's always rumors about Stockton and their viability and whether they'll be there. But yeah, it's interesting how it is the furthest trip. It's further than Texas. It's further than Iowa. So if there is a decision to do to the Roadrunners next year, what the NHL did to the Coyotes, it actually might not make every trip ridiculously far, but
Interesting.
Because did we talk about that at the beginning of the year? I can't remember when I visited with you both that because next year they're slated to have 10 teams in the Pacific Division. A third of the league or 10 out of 32 teams is going to be in one division. So they're really probably going to have to divide that up. But that's also interesting too. I wrote about this past week, how the playoff race is kind of strange for the Pacific because 7 of the 9 teams are going to make at least a 3-game playoff series. So the only real race is to win the division because you get a bye from that 3-game series. So instead of it last year during the pandemic, it was a 1-game playoff in, I want to say Irvine, where the Gulls were playing in Orange County.
It was Irvine in that first round, and then
right, but it was 1 game, and they played both, I think, on the same day, or 3 games on the same day, or something like that. And then the 3 winners of that advanced to a 3-game or 5-game series, one of which went and played Henderson, who got the bye. This year, the bye goes to the first place team. So if it was set up today, Stockton would get the bye. And then even Ontario, who's got the 4th best record in the league, would have to play a 3-game series to get to the real Calder Cup first round. So it's great in some respects because some teams are going to be able to see that, okay, 7 of 9 teams, and next year, presumably 7 of 10 will get in. But at the same time, you could be like Ontario and have a top 5 record in the league and completely get hosed, in terms of you'll host for 3 games, but you're getting a lot more wear on those tires.
That's why I'm glad that playoff series, the Pacific Division playoff is coming back. It kind of makes things interesting.
I'm torn on it. I mean, I think I like the competition for 4 teams to get in, but because if you really look at it, if you look across the divisions, it's something like 26 of the 31 teams are going to play after the regular season ends. I mean, granted, some will only play a game, some will play 3 games, but it's kind of a lot. So
it is a lot. It's true. But also,
they don't count it. Like the Calder Cup playoffs start with 16 teams.
Let's also be fair though, Brett. The Pacific Division only plays 68 games versus the rest of the American Hockey League will play 76.
Yeah, next year that changes though. It's 72 for everybody. So this is the last year of that. So I wonder what that's going to do with the playoffs going forward. But yeah, I think everyone goes to 72 next year.
Interesting. It'll be see how that works.
So anyways, 4 more midweek games for Tucson, and then everybody. It's going to be interesting on the East Coast how teams are going to be, if they're going to be okay with 2 less home dates. I mean, this is a gate-driven league. They need every single
as much
ticket
money as possible.
purchased and every hot dog and every, beer they can sell to make budget. But
absolutely. We still got more to get to on this episode of Locked On Coyotes, though. We'll wrap things up with Brett Fera in just a sec. But first, let's overturn the Carl for a quick word from our sponsors.
So, BetOnline has you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. And that's as football season continues its march to the playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head over to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
So, back here on Locked On Coyotes once again on this Wednesday, getting ready for the Tucson Roadrunners versus the Abbotsford Canucks. We got Brett Fera on with us today. And Brett, I did this with Adrian yesterday, and I'm pretty sure I also did it with you at the beginning of this year. Like not even beginning of this year. I'm talking back in February when I first, only a month into launching the podcast. But things can also change. Maybe you have other stories you want to tell. But if you remember, I for a while I did a stories from the press box segment. I really loved doing those. So let's add more. Any other stories that you had that you love to share that you experienced in the Tucson Roadrunners press box? I know we've seen some interesting stuff down there, even just in the last year. So
last week, 2 weeks, I guess last week, the midweek series. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but I think the Zamboni drivers were training new guys. I have video of them crashing into the boards a couple times. It's pretty nuts.
I mean, it seems like it takes a lot of skill to drive a Zamboni. I've actually gotten to ride on one at a Coyotes game. I won an in-arena contest, and it was really fun. But yeah, it looks very complicated. I cannot imagine doing it by myself.
It was wild, and it was post game, the Tuesday night game. I mean, I'm independent of the Roadrunners, but I'm appreciative of the partnership I have with them to be able to be independent as a reporter and still participate in certain things. So I kind of toe that line, admittedly. So I don't get myself in trouble. I don't think I can, or anyone else. But long story short, it's me, Adrian Denny, and Jimmy Peoples up in the press box, and we're kind of wrapping up. I'm finishing a story, and all of a sudden I hear this kind of, not loud. It sounded like, a Boko and Mama check into the boards, I look down and it's the Zamboni sort of peeling away. And Jimmy and I look at each other. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And next thing you know, I'm just watching, the dude's going fast. And down at the other end, it was basically, so he was in the middle of the ice and he's stretching from one goal to the other, basically doing the center portion of the ice. And it was only one Zamboni on the ice at the time. And so he got to the north end. This is the first one I just mentioned, and just turned too late or was slightly too fast. It wasn't speeding by any stretch, but when we watched the video comparing it to the in-game Wednesday night, you could tell in the intermissions, guys going much slower, different person, not the same guy. This was a younger guy versus an older guy that normally I think does it. And that particular one, it was not the truly Nolan Zamboni. It was the other one, which is what Casino del Sol, I think so. Anyway, yeah. So it just got, didn't catch the turning radius right and clipped the boards. And so came back down and did it again, but 5 times. And, the three of us are talking and we were just like, that's a 3-week break. If something goes through the boards, imagine supply chain issues, everything going on. So, I had never seen something like that before. It was a little wild. But yeah, it was definitely not. I do have video of it. I'll share it with you both. It's only of one. It's the last one, and it's not as good as the first 4, but it still happens.
Beautiful.
and again, those are the things I love to hear, right?
I,
Those kind of stories, because it's like fans won't see that. They definitely will not see that, because
yeah.
a lot of this stuff happens behind the scenes when everyone's gone, or when you assume 99% of people are gone. The last,
Well, there's a couple of other interesting things. One of them, one wasn't really in this press box, but I don't know if you both have talked about it in a previous episode, but story from Craig Morgan at PHNX, I think 2 weeks ago. He actually quoted me in the story about some of the stuff, Robyn, you and I have seen about the developments going on in the arena, and the Roadrunners won't talk about them. They admit they're happening, but they can't say what the purpose is. But they're basically building, for that building, so when I say this, it's very loose, but they're building the equivalent of luxury suites or priority seating. And they've got a test one right next to the riser Robyn and I sit on. So, tales from the press box, we don't get to sit in the press box. So our tales are from the concourse. Craig, asked Bill Daly at the NHL straight up, like, is it a possibility? Because people are starting to say, like, there might be some combination of games between Prescott and Tucson in the new ASU arena, and Bill Daly would not shoot it down. So that doesn't say it's happening, but it's kind of wild that an NHL deputy commissioner isn't shooting down rumors that a team may play in 3 arenas, none of which have more than 6,000 seats or 6,400 seats, which Tucson has. But part of it is the fact that they are doing some work in the arena, so that's going to be interesting to see what they actually pull out of that. And then the last one was talking about risers. I don't know who it was, but a scout on the one around the pole from where we sit, Robyn.
right?
Scout got a little too close to the edge, boom, goes flying. the chair leg flew
Well,
off the top of the riser. You and I have talked about this.
yeah,
Like,
no.
it's been ready to happen. And
Before, they only put in the back railing
yep.
of that riser, I think, like about a month into the actual season.
Mm-hmm.
Beforehand, it was you and me sitting there with nothing behind us, and
Yeah.
those chairs could easily fly back. And I was worried a couple times that I would just I would fall back and hit my head on the concourse.
Yeah.
That reminds me, I went to ASU games at Oceanside before the renovation. So like
Up
in
top?
2012. Yes, up top. This was during the NHL lockout. So I was just like, I need some kind of hockey to write about. So I went to ASU games, and that press box was very scary to be in because it's just like metal grating above the players. I'm like, this is terrifying.
You're
I
on,
feel like I'm gonna
you're on,
fall.
you're literally on top of the bench, or no,
Yeah,
not the bench, or the penalty box. You're on top of the penalty box, and
yeah. It was definitely an interesting thing. And I remember going to the Tucson arena for, I think it was the last game of the ACHA season. It was ASU U of A, and they gave me a ticket, and they're like, "Here you go. You're behind the goal." And I'm like, "There's no netting behind this goal. I'm not sitting there." And they're like, "Why not?" And it's like, uh, I know it's an ACHA game, but that puck still has a lot of speed. I don't want to get hit in the face with it.
Up top?
And
Up
uh,
top behind the goal, or where?
it was like anywhere behind the goal, there was like no netting at the time.
That's
I
the
don't
It's got to be on the
like.
north side where the
No,
seats,
it was
actual seats.
actual seats.
Oh yeah, that's
This
the north side. That's nuts to have
it
no
was
net there.
Yeah, it was like 2012, like long before the Roadrunners were there. Like, so it was just college hockey, but yeah, no netting. And I was like, this is dangerous. I don't know what you guys are playing at, but
Yeah, that's
I'll
wild.
just sit on the concourse. And it was still fine, like still great view, but yeah, I wasn't sitting there.
I've seen videos of what the Tucson Arena used to look like before they did the renovations for the Roadrunners to come into town. It was wild.
Yeah. It definitely felt like a college hockey arena. Like a good college hockey arena, like probably better than you would expect for an ACHA team.
Absolutely. But looks like we're running out of time. We're actually running overtime on this episode. Brett, I usually, of course, leave closing thoughts to any of our guests or anything you would like to share. Also, based and give that last moments after that of how people can find you on everywhere that they put your stuff.
Well, I appreciate it. Best ways to find me and follow along is either follow me on social media on Twitter at Brett Fera, or head to tucson.com/roadrunners will get you straight to all of the Roadrunners coverage. But no, thank you both for having me again. It's fun always to chat with you, and happy holidays. Hope it's a safe one. Hope it's a low key one. Hope it's a wonderful one as we head into the new year for you both.
Thanks.
Absolutely. And thanks again for coming on. We really appreciate it. That's going to be it for today's episode of Locked On Coyotes. If you like what you heard, don't forget to leave a review, like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. We are available everywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube for our wonderful video podcasts. Also, don't forget to interact with us on social media. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnCoyotes, on Twitter at LO_Coyotes. I am personally at Robyn_Leano. Once again, Robyn with a Y_LEANO. Carl Pavlik is at Carl Pavlik FFH. Ask us a question, interact with us. We can answer them right back or on a future episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode. Thanks to Brett once again for coming on today. Hope you guys are all staying safe out there. Hope you guys are staying healthy. Happy holidays, and don't forget to howl on.